what are some of the main things that cause performance problems for guys? Again, a lot of guys ask this. They finish too quick or they cannot get it up. What can guys do who are tired of feeling responsible for everything sex related? I hear this. I can totally see this being true. Usually it's like the guys who initiate sex, and it's usually guys who have to like set the mood right and get the girl in her mood. You know, it's kind of like, there's kind of like, a lot of times there's like this begging process. Is it true that men have a G-spot in their butthole? Why is it there? What kind of game was God trying to play? Another question that actually a lot of women asked. Why can I not orgasm with my partner? Lots of women who can orgasm on their own, but not when they're with their partner. I'm just going to call you Dr. Kate.
Kate's fine.
No, doctor. You don't
It's
make
fine.
people call you Dr. Kate?
No. No.
I would.
Not unless there's a power struggle.
Oh.
It's like that.
I can see that. Okay, so Dr. Kate is a certified psychologist and sex therapist with over 14 years of clinical experience. You're the founder of Modern Intimacy and co-founder of Triune Therapy Group.
Triune Therapy Group?
Triune. And so I'm just gonna like dive right into the questions.
Okay.
Okay. Porn addiction. Seriously, I put up a question on my Instagram story for people to ask their questions, and the amount of people asked how to get over my porn addiction, like I was a little scared. I was like, wait, are these amount of guys feel addicted to porn to this level? So I was like, I'm just gonna make that the first question.
Okay. Well, I want to start by saying there are some differences in the field of mental health about what to call compulsive sexual behavior, whether it's related to porn or sexual behavior with partners in real life. So I'm going to use the language compulsive sexual behavior disorder and porn addiction interchangeably, knowing that there's some distinction between different camps of professionals. But for most people, porn addiction is the easy way to say it. And what we're really talking about is feeling out of control with their relationship to pornography. So porn in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? Just like alcohol is not a bad thing, our relationship to it dictates whether or not it can be a healthy force in our lives. And for a lot of people, they've come to use porn so frequently and in ways that actually inhibit their ability to experience pleasure, because the way that they're using it, it starts becoming a ritual and it starts to undermine their ability to really stay engaged with the pleasure part of it, because so much of it is about just sort of hitting that next high and getting that next get. And so they really have kind of a dissociated relationship to the pornography and the masturbation. And for a lot of people, I'm seeing that they are struggling with partners in real life to experience the same kind of arousal. We're seeing sexual dysfunction issues for people who typically, given their age and their overall health, we wouldn't see the same kinds of sexual dysfunction issues like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. So a lot of men are struggling right now and they want answers. So there's no really easy fix, but it's the way to get through it is to work with a community, work with a sex therapist or a sex addiction therapist, whoever you feel most comfortable with, and really find a way to replace the pornography with other life-enhancing activities and address any underlying issues that might be compelling you towards using sex in a way that is a coping strategy. And really kind of over the top, exclusively a coping strategy and not for pleasure, not for connection, not for anything else that, might be beneficial.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I had to turn that down.
It's too loud now.
Yeah, too loud now. So how to help is really, a question of getting started, and it's a slow but steady process of really kind of checking in with yourself and thinking about what's happening in your body and noticing those cues that would compel you toward using porn in a way that no longer works for you. And again, replacing it with a different life enhancing behavior. So that could be reading a book or connecting with a friend or taking your dog for a walk or going to the gym or doing.
Replacing porn with reading a book, I feel like might be a little bit of a stretch, though, not gonna lie.
Hey, it depends on the book you read. No, I know it sounds a little silly at the start, but when people get to that state of compulsivity, what their body is saying is just give me a different feeling, right?
Right.
That's really the key.
Give me something stimulating.
Exactly. So it's about retraining your body, retraining your brain, retraining the behavioral patterns that you have established that make porn the only solution, right? And so shifting that away to other forms of stimuli, and sometimes they might even be erotic, but maybe changing it to a written erotica or audio erotica, something that has a subtle shift and a subtle difference so that the brain interacts with the material differently.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think I like how in the beginning you said that it's a compulsive behavior problem, not so much a porn problem, because so many people watch porn and they have like boundaries and measures for themselves, and they put it away when they need to. They go to it when they want to. They don't feel addicted to it. And it really does come to that compulsive behavior. It's like I smoke these You've like heard of puffs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like these little cartridges with nicotine. This is actually a good excuse for me to grab it. But so many people were dying smoking these things like in the previous years, so many teenagers, and so their parents started suing Juul company, trying to take them out of their business because like, look, my 14-year-old kid died because he smoked this. It's like, no. He died because of his compulsive behavior. I smoke it and I have boundaries for myself. So many people smoke it and they enjoy it, but they know when to stop. They don't smoke 14 cartridges a day.
Right.
It's the exact same thing with porn. It's like, if you don't have boundaries for yourself, you're just going to get yourself in trouble with anything, really. Alcohol, drugs, porn, anything. Right?
Yeah. Sex is never a problem unless it's a problem. Right. And that goes for porn, too. And so the question that each person needs to ask themselves, or I shouldn't say needs, would benefit from asking themselves is, does my relationship to porn have any negative implications in the rest of my life? And if the answer is yes, then it might be worth revisiting your relationship to it and changing things up a little bit. Maybe putting some containment around the behaviors and seeing what happens, or reaching out for support and talking to some friends instead of going to porn right away if you're feeling stressed or dysregulated. So there are lots of ways to try and redevelop a healthy relationship to porn for some people. And for some people, it becomes so compulsive that even going to it a little bit feels too much for them.
So would you say someone who feels extremely addicted to porn as of like right now today, would you say that they should cold turkey it and then just completely cut it out? Or would you say more of like a slowly take it out of your life?
Everyone's different. So for some people, kind of reducing it slowly, little by little, can be enough, right? And then they might redevelop a healthy relationship in terms of frequency to the porn material that they're watching. Other people, they can't do that, right? They start a little bit and it just is too much. So they go right back into the same degree of compulsivity that they started with. It's very difficult for them to practice moderation, at least initially, but sometimes forever. So some people choose to abstain. And there's really no right or wrong way. This is a very individualized question and a very individualized solution. Each person gets the opportunity to decide what their values are around porn, what their preferences are in terms of frequency and style of porn that they consume and when and where and all of that. And then really working with a sex therapist or working with someone that you trust to help you sort of consider the things that you haven't considered so that you can make the best decisions for you is going to provide you with the most straightforward path to finding, a different way to relate to sex and porn.
Yeah, I get that. It's kind of like a diet. Yeah. It's like, when you're trying to like cut out sugar, and there are two type of people. The ones that are like, I'm just not going to buy anything that's going to be tempting and has sugar, and I'm just going to keep it out of my house so I don't get tempted. So quote unquote cold turkey. Or there are people who are like, no, I'm going to buy a tiramisu or whatever, and then I'm just going to have like one bite.
We should totally have tiramisu right now.
I know. I was just thinking about it.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. That's a great metaphor because some people need to abstain. Having whatever the thing is that they're trying to contain their behavior around is too hard.
Yeah.
So they choose to just keep it away from their temptation, and other people can, reevaluate.
Absolutely. Oh, guys, get it together, please. Like, figure this shit out.
But it's not just guys. It's not just men. I know.
Really? What do you think the percentages compare? Like, what percent of women who, like, do you think are addicted to porn compared to guys?
It's a really hard question to answer because there's so much more stigma around women and sexuality that women are a lot less likely to talk about it than men.
To admit it.
Yeah. But I've worked with a lot of women who struggle with sex, love, and porn compulsivity issues. And, they exist. And if we look at the underlying variables that usually drive that behavior, it's things like insecurity, it's things like loneliness, it's things like fear of inadequacy. And all of these sort of underlying psychological triggers exist in people regardless of their gender. And sex becomes the conduit for resolution in their mind.
Yeah, I can totally see women having that problem too. I don't know. For me, it's too distracting. It's like I always get distracted by how terrible the acting is and how terrible the IKEA furniture in the background is. It's just like, and then the whole thing is ruined. It has to be like a really, really nicely produced movie for me to get into it. And like their conversations are terrible. The acting is just so off. And what is this whole thing with stepmoms? Jesus Christ. Just step everything. Stepmom, stepdad, stepbrother, and like.
Well, it's a boundary, right? It's breaking a social line, and there's a level of excitement and arousal that comes with that fantasy. It's not necessarily a question of I want to be intimate with a family member, but it's I just want to step over the line of what's okay. And that kind of testing the waters a little bit, pushing the boundaries just a little bit can create a lot of excitation in our nervous systems, which makes sex that much more fun.
Gross. Okay, second question. Retroactive jealousy. How to handle feeling jealous of your partner's sexual past. I feel like especially a lot of girls will have this problem too. Like, I remember when my boyfriend asked me how many people you've been with. I was like 3. How many have you been with? He was like 66. I was like, okay. We're just gonna put that right over there and not think about it ever again. So it's like, how do you deal with something like that? Or not necessarily like body count, right? Or just like a certain ex that you just like can't get over. So yeah, how do you handle feeling jealous?
Well, retroactive jealousy is a little different than regular jealousy. Retroactive jealousy is really about kind of getting stuck a little bit further into the relationship about your partner's past. And it usually comes up for people when they've begun to have an emotional connection to their partner. In the dating phase, they might not care so much about how many people they've slept with before or how awesome their last partner was or was not. But once you start developing, a good connection with someone, suddenly there's more to lose. And a lot of insecurities tend to rise to the surface for most people. But retroactive jealousy is sort of those same insecurities, but accelerated and amplified. So it feels a lot more like an obsessive compulsive disorder because the thoughts and the images that come into your mind are totally intrusive and they're not based in reality. Right? You didn't know the person or you weren't part of their relationship back then. Right. So there's a lot of imagery that feels really intrusive and invasive. So it can feel really really scary for people and really like they don't know what to do with it. So there's a couple of things. One, it's really about recognizing when you're getting into that state and practicing distraction exercises, breathing exercises, and then at the core of it, thinking about those insecurities, talking with your partner, talking with friends and family, or a therapist or someone you trust who can kind of help you reevaluate the reality of the quality of your current relationship and put some of those fears aside.
Right. And quite honestly, like, if you don't want to know the answer of something, like, don't ask.
Don't ask.
Why do you, like, poke? I know so many girls do this. It's like they ask a guy something and the guy knows the trouble is there. It's like they sense an argument starting and they don't want to answer it. And the girl just goes, no, tell me. It's fine. I promise. Like, I don't care. I just want to know. And they just keep poking and poking and poking until he finally gives an answer and now you're mad. Like, don't do that to yourself. What's the point? Okay. Another question that actually a lot of women asked. Why can I not orgasm with my partner? Lots of women who can orgasm on their own, but not when they're with their partner.
It's a great question, and so many women struggle with this, and there are many reasons why a woman might be able to orgasm solo, but not with a partner. And I'll just sort of run through the list in no particular order. More often than not, there are relationship insecurities, right? They don't know where they stand, or they've been hurt in past relationships. So it's really hard for them to surrender and to relax and to be open to the experience of an orgasm with another person in the room. And our bodies need to relax in order to come. So it's going to be really hard if you're in a state of hypervigilance or fear. Other reasons can be that maybe their partner is not very well attuned to them, and so they're not as fully aroused as they could be. Whereas when you're by yourself, you know exactly what you want, how you want it, where you want it, for how long, and at what speed, and all of the things. So it can be different when someone else is in the room and they're maybe learning your anatomy, or they're not as invested in getting it right as you are because they're more invested in doing it the way they saw on porn or in a movie or something. So that's a big disconnect.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it's a question of a lack of sex education for one or both partners. Surprisingly, a lot of people just don't understand the ins and outs of their own anatomy, especially their genitals. So they don't really know how to explore for pleasure, and they haven't tried. So, each of us is responsible for our own orgasm, to quote Emily Morse, and we all have to know our own bodies in order to communicate to someone else what we like and what we don't like, which brings me to the next point. A lot of women don't feel empowered enough to have that conversation about, I like this, I like that, stop doing this, do more of that, because they don't want to hurt their partner's feelings, or they feel like they are not entitled to pleasure and, they're just kind of a passive participant in the experience.
So sad. I have a theory, actually. This is something that also really bothers me about porn. Is that I think so many women put on a show for the guy when they're in a bedroom, because like sex is so much more catered toward like men. It's so much more for men that women just feel like it's this thing that they're doing for the guy. So they put on this show of like making so many noises that you don't make those noises when you're masturbating by yourself in your bed. And it's like it becomes like that.
Yeah.
And then you forget. Yeah, it's a performance. And you forget about yourself. And it's like, you can't be doing all that at the same time. You can't be acting and actually like focusing on your own pleasure at the same time, right?
Yeah. That's so true. I'm glad you pointed that out because, as I said before, there's nothing inherently wrong with porn, but one of the big implications of porn, the way mainstream porn is created today, is that it is created through the male gaze and created, to focus specifically on male-centric pleasure. Why? Because men are primarily the consumers. Why are men primarily the consumers? Because it's focused through the male gaze and on male-centric pleasure. So it's a gnarly little feedback loop. And it really sets the stage for a lot of expectations for people of all genders on how they should be in bed, as opposed to them really authentically feeling themselves and communicating that with their partner.
Absolutely. I saw this one tab on, I think Pornhub. It was like porn for females. Like, so it's like it's made like catered towards women. And I was like, okay, let's see what's going on here.
Oh no, what was it?
And it was just the most ridiculous thing ever.
Oh no.
It was just like this Barbie type girl in like a Barbie castle and like a bed with feathers, and the guy like kissed her head to toe for like an hour, and I was like, do you really think that's what all women want? No, the whole Barbie shit, like the super stuff, I'm sure a lot of women are into that. A lot of women want to be smacked around. But it's just like, not the way that it shows from,
Right.
as you said, like the guy's perspective. Because the things that girls do for themselves is very different than when there's like a partner involved.
So true. So true.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you do want good porn that's made from a female gaze and actually is hot, check out ericalust.com. She makes
Her last name is Lust?
Yeah.
Like actually?
I don't know. She may have had it changed. If not, that would be so lucky for her and fortuitous.
Coincidence? I think not.
Right? But Erica Lust makes great porn, and there's a new site out called Frolic Me. They also make really great porn from the female gaze.
Okay. All right. I'll ask you for those links later. Okay. So is this called How to Deal with a Sexless Relationship? Is that the Coolidge effect? Or
It can be.
a married couple that have been together for far too long and both are, people get busy and especially when kids are involved and, sometimes you just then would rather nap than have sex. Is that what Coolidge effect is?
Yeah, the Coolidge effect essentially is that we like novelty, right? All human beings are wired for novelty. So whether that means a different partner or seeing your partner with a new lens and new dimensions, right, can mean different things. So many people do fall into that trap of I'm bored. And the reason for that isn't always because we fall out of love or because we're not attracted to our partners, but we do tend to habituate to what we see and who we see every day in our day-to-day life. So when we see our partner in these kind of overly familiar ways at home, making breakfast, feeding the kids, taking the dog out, doing the laundry, putting the dishes away, bending over to take the trash out, they sort of blend into the wall and blend into the furniture after a while. They're just part of the experience. So we have to work a little harder to see our partners as real dimensional humans and to see them in a new light and constantly renew the perspective that we have on them and on our relationship. That's what really sustains a healthy, thriving sex life throughout a marriage or a long-term relationship. But it happens sometimes. The other thing that can happen is resentments build, right? So if you have partners who aren't communicating to each other, with each other very appropriately, and they're leaving a lot unsaid, that resentment is like an arousal killer.
Oh,
It's brutal.
God damn.
Yeah.
Jesus. So much work. I'm so scared.
Don't be scared. Just go to therapy. It'll be fine.
Yeah, because that just seems like it would be the default thing to happen. And like it seems like you have to almost be so conscious and so aware and just be really smart and on top of your shit.
Well, sometimes that can backfire, right? Sometimes we just need to tap a little bit more into our animalistic lust and our primal feelings,
Right.
All that good stuff, and turn that on for our partner, because sometimes the divide between love and lust is great, and it's hard to merge the two. So when we really sort of open our hearts and open our worlds to a partner, we create a new family, and that sort of familial energy can make it really hard to bring that hardcore primal lust into the room because we love this person. Can they handle all of our sexual energy? Or are we going to hurt them? Are we going to turn them away? Will we somehow compromise all of this good stuff that we have over here? Because remember, we were raised, most of us, in a family. And so we were raised with all of those lovey, ooey, gooey feelings, but that was a sexless experience for most people, hopefully. But when we get into our adult lives, we have sort of a neurobiological imprint that says, oh yeah, that's what love looks like. And so we kind of shut off that lust feature unless we work hard to rekindle it.
Absolutely. There should be sexy time. Yes. There should be a scheduled sexy time.
Yeah.
Because it's okay, you go to work, that's scheduled. You do your hobbies, that's scheduled. Why not sexy time be scheduled? No matter what we're going through, even if we're in the middle of a fight, pause, we put it on pause, and then we have a scheduled sexy time, whether it's Friday, Saturday, whenever it works for the both of you. And if you just are going through something that just makes you hate the other person, that you just don't want to do that, role play.
Exactly.
Put a wig on them so you don't have to recognize them.
It's a great time to bring out the blindfolds.
Trash bag. Trash bag over the head.
Wait a minute. You want them to breathe, so make it a cloth bag.
There you go. Paper bag. Okay. What are some of the main things that cause performance problems for guys? Again, a lot of guys ask this. They finish too quick or they cannot get it up. What's a nice way to say can't get it up?
Erectile dysfunction?
Oh, there we go.
So, so many of the concerns that anyone has when it comes to sexual dysfunction is really about fear, it's about anxiety, and it's really about not being embodied, well, especially if we're talking about early ejaculation. So what I mean by that is sometimes when we get really anxious, our entire experience of being conscious sort of comes up here, right by the eyeballs and in the top of our brain and our head. That's sort of where we live, up in our brain, and we sort of spin around here. And we lose track of what's going on in our bodies, which is what ultimately gives us orgasm control. Because when we're more present in our bodies and less up in our brains noodling around in our anxiety, then we can recognize things like contractions, and we can recognize things like sensations that ultimately lead to that point of no return before an orgasm, before ejaculation. So
don't overthink it, basically.
Don't overthink it, which is so much easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm working with people, a lot of what we're working on is, teaching and giving them education about exercises they can do at home to practice really focusing on slowing down and recognizing the sensations in their genitals as they happen, so they can, practice a squeeze here and there instead of continuing to simulate movement. And really kind of slowing themselves down and practicing what it's like to recognize when they're getting close in their arc of arousal to an ejaculation, and then bringing themselves back. So
you can do that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can bring yourself back?
Mm-hmm. As long as you haven't hit that point of no return. Once somebody's hit that point, obviously.
It's done.
Yeah, it's over. Yeah.
Okay.
But the other things that I recommend for people struggling with that is to take it slow in a relationship, right? Get to know a person, because a lot of the anxiety that men feel around early ejaculation is rooted in, what if she finds out and then rejects me? What if it happens with her and rejects me? So the antidote for that is to get to know someone as a friend, share with them your experience, and then make sex not so much about penetration. Focus on other
the
ways.
Experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't overthink it, but then sometimes you get in your head about getting in your head.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It's like you're trying to be present and conscious and not be in your head, but then you're in your head about that.
So it's kind of like meditating. Do you meditate?
Yes, every day.
Okay. So when you get a thought that comes in your head during meditation, what do?
You watch it.
Exactly. You watch it and you watch it leave, and then you come back to your breathing. Sex is the same way when you're struggling with a sexual dysfunction. You want to observe whenever you're getting into that headspace. Just to observe it.
And calmly, though.
Yeah.
Don't get angry, right?
Well, it's hard for us to tell our nervous systems not to have a feeling, but when you recognize it, just sort of observe it and let it go. Maybe take a break, switch to oral sex for a while, or play with do some anal play, or put a movie on and take a break. Make an ice cream bowl and a sundae, and maybe pour some chocolate syrup on each other. So play in different ways, right?
Yeah.
Don't make it about the erection, because the erection or the ejaculation, these are not the end-all, be-all experiences of sex.
True.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I wanted to say something else. You said something. I forgot. Okay. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So when we say early ejaculation, are we talking like, what does that mean? Like 30 seconds or like 5 minutes?
It means any ejaculation that occurs before the person having the ejaculation wants it to happen. So it could, everybody...
What if you have high expectations for yourself?
Well, then you still have early ejaculation by your own bar.
So there's not like a certain definition of what early ejaculation is supposed to be.
No, I wouldn't put a time limit on it, because really everyone's different. But for most people, it happens within a couple of minutes. There are some people who certainly set the bar high for themselves and get frustrated if it happens sooner than 15 minutes. But, that's maybe a different sort of mental health concern to address there too. But when we're talking specifically about early ejaculation, it really is earlier than the person wants it to happen, because they don't feel like they're in control of it. and it causes them some distress. So this is not the same. It happened sooner than I would want, but it was 20 minutes in and I enjoyed it and it was great. If only I'd lasted another minute, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But this is sort of the...
Overachievers.
20 minutes overachiever?
No.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
So, yeah, I mean, it's really subjective, and it can cause just as much distress if it's 6 minutes in or 2 minutes in for people.
So when someone like really talks about early ejaculation, it's a good thing to ask them, what does that mean to you?
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. How is it causing distress?
Right. Okay. All right, we're breezing through these. This one's for the boys. What can guys do who are tired of feeling responsible for everything sex related? I hear this. I can totally see this being true. Usually it's like the guys who initiate sex, and it's usually guys who have to like set the mood right and get the girl in her mood. You know, it's kind of like there's kind of like a lot of times there's like this begging process.
A begging process?
Right. A lot of times.
To be sexual?
I feel like for a lot of like relationships, like especially when, I don't know if it's like a marriage or like a long-term relationships, I know like a lot of women just don't want to do it. They're tired. Lots of headaches, it seems like, is out there. So what do you recommend? Like how can women initiate more? Or what do you recommend for a guy that wants to get his woman to just like initiate more sex so that it's not always him?
So what I would recommend in that case is that people sit down and have a really earnest conversation about what gets in the way of you initiating sex. Because many women feel like they can't, or they'll be seen as somebody who's more sexually experienced or promiscuous than they want to be seen. A lot of women have developed shame around sex in general. So to initiate really exacerbates that shame. Sometimes women fear that they'll be rejected. Sometimes,
true.
right?
Because when women initiate it, they don't want to get rejected.
They don't. No. No. And I was just reading this article the other day that talked about how men are so much more accustomed to getting rejected because they initiate and take the first step forward so much more than women do. Women are starting to do it more, so they're experiencing that rejection, but it's a callus that needs to be developed, right? So if you're not used to hearing no a lot, it's really hard to hear no. But so coming back to this question, the other thing, and this might be hard for some people to hear, but maybe your partner doesn't want to be sexual with you because it's not all that interesting. And that's a bitter pill to swallow sometimes. So, if you're willing to have this conversation, be willing to eat a little humble pie and talk to them earnestly. Are you getting your needs met? Is there something I can do differently? Am I attuned to you well enough? Do I help you get there? Do I help you feel safe? Do I help you feel heard? Do I help you feel seen in this relationship? Do I pull my weight around the house and help with the things that we've both decided that are our respective tasks? Do you need anything else from me? Because for many women, arousal starts way before they're in the bedroom. And if that match is not ignited, forget it. It's going to take forever for them to get turned on if it's ever going to happen. So start thinking about, what does your relationship look like outside of the bedroom? And how can you make sure that is a pleasurable, respectful, safe, invigorating experience, and also make sure you let your partner know, like, this would really turn me on if you initiated this, and talk about whatever fears they might have, and then see how things go, and give positive reinforcement when you see those efforts happening.
Reward them when they do the right thing. Yeah. And I think a really good side note for this is that a lot of times guys think they initiated sex, but really it was the girl. Like if you get a girl undressed and she has matching lingerie underneath, you did not initiate nothing. Let me tell you that.
So true.
It's like, yeah, we might like let you think that you're starting it, but we started this a long time ago.
Yeah. If that situation is situated, it was in the cards from the get-go.
Right. It's just like a lot of times we let guys think that they have all the control and they're doing all the things. Meanwhile,
But I will say, a lot of women are setting the stage to be open for the opportunity, but it doesn't always mean they want it to happen once it gets there.
Yeah.
Right.
There's also like, I think that there is a beauty in like being chased and chasing. And it's like, that's just sexy.
Well, everyone wants to be desired.
Right. And it's like, yes, a lot of girls, like honestly, me included, like you might want it to happen, but you might throw in a couple no's in there. But the no's, but okay, this actually kind of ties in with consent.
Yeah.
There are different types of no's. There is, no, stop it. You're being so bad. No. And then there's no. There's a huge difference between those. And it's like, I don't know, this might actually get a lot of hate because like with the whole Me Too movement and consent, it's like no means no. Not gonna lie, sometimes no means hell fucking yes.
I want to be careful how I respond to that because I hear what you're saying. There is a bit of a tease, but I think what and the tease dance can be really fun. I would encourage people to use different language other than no because it can be really confusing. But really, no means no, even if it's said in a playful way. And I'll tell you why. Because many people who have been sexually abused or sexually harassed have been brutally physically victimized when they say no sternly.
Yeah.
And so they soften their no and they make it more playful and they make it more of a joke.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets a little murky, right? Because your playful no, silly, stop means keep going, buddy, you're turning me on, right? Whereas someone else's means please don't punch me in the face when I turn you down. Right?
Yeah.
So it's dicey there.
Yeah, true. And a lot of times when you're like younger, you don't really know how to say no.
Exactly. We don't have that modeled for us very well.
Yeah.
That's changing, thankfully. But if you're ever unsure about whether or not consent is on the table, then the answer is it isn't.
Yeah.
You should be so absolutely positive that you have an affirmative yes before you do anything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, assume it's a no.
Maybe that's why older guys like younger girls, because they don't really know how to say no.
Well,
it's like that's something you learn when you get more confident, and confidence usually comes, I think, with age for sure. And like you're more sure about what you want when you're older, and like your no's are a lot more stern than when you're like 19, 20, 21, 22.
Yeah. There definitely can be a power imbalance.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, this question. I really like this question. How can you change your perceived role in the bedroom? So it's like, imagine you're in a long-term relationship of a few years, or you're married, and you've kind of taken this role of whatever it is, the safe person, the unchanged in the bedroom. You've always had the same thing, same go-to. And it used to work in the beginning. Now it's not anymore. Things are getting boring, and you don't really know how to change it, because quite honestly, changing your role in the bedroom can be quite awkward. You know, like imagine a couple that have been married for a long time, and you know, the woman has been like the safe, you know, whatever. And now she just kind of wants to be called a slut in the bedroom. And if she brings that up to her husband, he's going to be like, why are you being so weird? Like, why are you saying that? Where are you getting that from? So how do you change your perceived role?
It's such a great question. And it comes up a lot in couples therapy because we are not static creatures, right? And while our arousal template is established for the most part, you know, when we're pretty young, around 7 to 10 years old, we certainly can be informed by different things in our lives and experience shifts in what we are attracted to, who we are aroused to, or the fantasies that turn us on. So one, I would say it's really normal for people to experience curiosity and want to open up their sexual repertoire a bit. So I think the first thing to maybe think about if you're experiencing a desire to shift your role in the bedroom or try something new would be to think about the meaning that it has for you, the meaning that it might have for your partner, and open up a conversation, you know, gently and non-judgmentally, and ask your partner to take the same position with you too, because unfortunately, sex is still considered such a taboo topic, and we have so much meaning that we have overcoupled with sexual behavior. that sometimes people make flash judgments and they don't even realize they're doing it. So,
Yeah.
Talk with your partner and let them know, like, hey, there's been something that I've been curious about. Are you open to hearing about it? Are you open to talking through it with me? I don't know what it means yet. I don't even know if I want to do it, but I want to talk about it. So can we set aside some time and talk about it? And then maybe talk about, okay, so here it is. Here's the thing that's been curious for me that I'd like to try or I'd like to talk about trying. Do you have any questions, fears, concerns about doing this? If we do it and one or both of us doesn't like it, then what are we going to do? Is it off the table? Is it something we can continue to work on? At some point, some couples decide to just sort of put it away and they don't bring the new thing back into their sex life. Some couples love it and they find themselves just diving into new dimensions of sexual vitality. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time for people to figure out if they do like the changes or not. So they'll do it a few times and then maybe reevaluate and have a debriefing session and talk with a sex therapist because, again, we often have these implicit biases that tell us, I can't like this thing, it's bad. Or if I do like this, it'll mean XYZ about me. And we don't even realize that. So when we can unpack some of those meanings, there's a whole lot more sexual behavior that's available to us and really, really fun. And it takes the sting out of the Coolidge effect.
Yeah. I think a lot of times if people are very religious, that's when like those judgments really start to, because it's like, I don't want to affiliate myself with that kind of behavior, even in the bedroom, because that goes against whatever my beliefs are. It's like when you tie everything together, it's like, no, things can be separate, right?
We've really gotten into a practice in the 21st century here of compartmentalizing sex and sort of making it this thing that we do over here, right, that doesn't touch any other parts of our lives. Yeah. And to your point, there are some religions that are more rigid and more punitive around sex.
True.
And so it can be really hard for people to feel free to express themselves sexually in a way that, really feels authentic to their true erotic self, because they have all these judgments that have been breathing down their neck about sex in general, let alone the kind of sex they like.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of judgment. I think couples should just have like a sex to-do list or like a sex bucket list.
I love that.
Right? It's like, okay, we want to go here, we want to go to Africa, we want to go to Canada. Like this is our like travel bucket list. These are the things we want to do. This is our list for grocery shopping. You definitely have those things for everything else. Why not have a sex list?
Why not?
Right? You can like have it in your notes, and you can like on your phone, you can literally like share notes, right, with each other. So that anytime you see something in a movie, you see something in porn, you get inspired by certain things and like a thought comes to your head.
Yeah.
You put it down in those notes, and because you're sharing it with the other person, it shows up in their notes as well.
It's a great idea.
So it's like you don't actually even have to have that conversation with them if you find that awkward. It will show in their notes. And so later, if they see a certain type of different behavior in the bedroom, they can kind of make the connection themselves like, oh, maybe this has to do with this note that was shared with me earlier. That can also kind of bring some mystery to it so that you don't have to necessarily have open conversation, because some people like feel a little awkward talking about certain things. They just want to do it.
Well, if you feel awkward talking about it, though, what are you going to do if you feel awkward doing it or if your partner doesn't receive it well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
It's I don't know that there's one right answer.
Yeah.
And I think it really depends on sort of what you're thinking about bringing into your sex life. Some people want something done to them, right? And so there might be less hesitation from a partner, whereas some people want to explore doing something to their partner, right? For example,
True.
Right. One couple that I worked with, they were really curious. They had different sexual fantasies, and one of them wanted to practice with some urination play. And the other partner was pretty taken aback because they didn't want to be urinated on, but that was part of the other partner's fantasy. So, we had to really talk through what is the meaning there and what does this look like for both of you? How does it shift and change how you see yourselves and see each other as partners if you play with this idea? And they chose not to do it, right? But other partners, other couples that I've worked with and people that I've worked with do kind of talk through things and they decide, no, I'm willing to give this a shot because now I understand what it means to my partner to play with this side of their sexuality.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So maybe you can so maybe after you share those notes with them, they can also put a thumbs up or a thumbs down in front of it, and then you will see it right in your notes, and so you'll know if you should like go there or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. It's a great idea.
Golden showers, thumbs down. Okay. All right. How can someone get their sex drive back? Like someone who used to have a good sex drive and now it's just not as good anymore. How can someone get it back?
Well, I think it helps to first discover maybe how it got off the rails. So sometimes that can be due to a medical condition. Sometimes they might have anxiety or depression or PTSD that's really getting in the way of them being able to access their sexual vitality. Sometimes there's external stressors in their life. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they don't have enough time in the day to practice, good self-care. So they're really depleted. And I think when you're in that space of noticing that your sex drive has changed, it's really important to check in with a physician, make sure nothing is wonky with your hormones or, no medical conditions have really kind of set something off kilter for you. And some medications can cause side effects that really can dampen arousal and libido. So that would be my first recommendation step. And second, then it's time to sort of get clear about what's going on in your life and what's going on in your mental health, and then your relationship, right? Because oftentimes when we're not feeling right in our relationship, our sex drive just sort of falls out.
Yeah. And I feel like as a partner, like you should dig that sometimes out of your partner. Like, what's going on with you? Is everything okay? Like, is there something you want to talk about? Even if they're not like very open, because sometimes like people don't really know that something's going on within them, but the person who's known them for such a long time can sense that something's different. Yeah. And so I feel like at that point, it kind of becomes a little bit more your responsibility to sit them down and dig it out of them. A lot of people are just like not that well in tune with their own emotions either, right? They distract themselves with work or whatever it is when something's going on. And so if they have a partner who senses that, maybe you can sit them down and just dig it out of them.
Yeah.
Right? And see how you can like work through it together.
I mean, for some people, that would be a really effective strategy. For other people, it might send them further into withdrawal or retreat. It really depends on kind of how they're organized.
Yeah.
But certainly it's worth asking the question, are you okay? What's going on?
I love your job. That's such a fun job. Like people just come out to you and they just spill.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Things that they don't talk about it with like anybody else.
Yeah. It's really an honor to be a part of that part of people's lives.
Yeah. So delicate too. Is it true that men have a G-spot in their butthole? Why is it there? What kind of game was God trying to play?
Well, it's true and false in the sense that men do have what's called a P-spot, right? The prostate, right? That's accessible via touch through massage. So you can reach it through the anus, right? Either with a sex toy or with a hand or with a penis. And you can stimulate the prostate from inside. You can also reach the prostate through stimulating the perineum, which is between the base of the penis and the testicles, and then the anus. Gooch? Is that what you call it? The gooch?
I think so.
I don't know.
Look at Kyle.
What's it called, Kyle?
Taint.
Well, on women. Yeah. So, yeah.
The gooch.
Yeah. Okay. I call it perineum. So yeah. I know. So much a sex therapist.
Such a doctor.
Yes. So
what is it called?
It's the prostate, but we can stimulate it between the base of the penis and testicles and the anus. There's the perineum.
Perineum. Touch my perineum.
Touch my perineum. Get that P-spot, baby. So you can stimulate it that way or through the anus. And the orgasms are supposed to be off the charts for men or for people with prostates. Yeah.
What do you do with a guy who's not willing to do that? Because it makes him feel gay. If anything goes into a straight guy's butthole, he's going to feel gay.
Not every straight man, but certainly
most of them.
certainly some who are maybe a little bit less secure in their masculinity, but some people just don't want their anuses touched, and that's okay, right? Maybe they'll enjoy.
Surprise them with a finger.
I wouldn't do that. No, I don't recommend that. That would be considered sexual assault. Nope. But check in with them, and maybe they'd like some perineum stimulation, and that could.
Would you like some perineum stimulation, baby?
On a tray. No, I mean, some guys don't even know that part of their body exists.
Right.
And sexually active men don't even know that part of their body exists. So
I know, I try to tell them, they deny it. Deny.
Well, we don't have the best sex education in America, and they don't do a lot of P-spot stimulation in porn. So it's not always something that a lot of men have awareness around. But, and again, many people with prostates just decide, this is not for me. I'm not comfortable with it. It can feel a little bit like pressure, and some people don't like that sensation. So if they don't, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people love it. And once you start, they'll want it all the time. And there's no right or wrong way to P-spot, G-spot, A-spot, or otherwise.
What's A-spot?
So the A-spot is inside the vagina. It's a little bit higher than the G-spot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that where you do the fish hook thing for?
That's usually for the G-spot. That sort of come hither.
Yeah.
That thing, that's a G-spot stimulation technique. With the A-spot, it's a little bit higher in the vaginal wall, and it doesn't have the concentrated sort of area of tissue like the G-spot. So it's not going to be the place to stimulate a female ejaculation, but it really is a hot spot when it comes to arousal, and it can help with all of the good feelings that come with being more aroused and lubrication. Do you need some wine?
Yeah, no, this is just so much to take in. It's so good to know these things, honestly. And I think a lot of times, let's say you bring something up or you try to do something, because people usually don't bring things up in a conversation. You have to really be comfortable with someone to like have a literally like a things that we're into, things that like don't do because of this and this. A lot of times you got to kind of keep in mind that if you're trying to do something and the other person is not into it, that could maybe even be a result of maybe they've been assaulted in that way in the past, and they just don't want anything related to that.
Exactly.
It's like, don't push.
Yeah.
Don't push.
That's why I'm a big fan of never doing something that someone hasn't given consent to, because you never know what people are walking around with, and the cascade of emotions that might be triggered when you do something that you already know they're not fond of.
Yeah. True. What has been your most interesting, fascinating, or weird case in your career?
I don't like the word weird because it's pathologizing, but let's see. Let me think. Some of the more interesting cases that I've had the honor really to work on happened when I worked in the prison systems, and I used to work with sex offenders. So I'm not going to talk too in depth about any of the cases because I don't want anyone else to sort of live with that imagery in their minds. But I really had a different level of respect for the ways in which the human mind and human behavior can really become compromised, and the things that would lead people to do. I've worked with people who were serial murderers, serial rapists, who offended against children, animals. So I would say that, from sort of an acuity perspective, so how severe is a case, those are some of the most severe cases, and really, compel a lot of learning about human behavior and trauma and the influence of our environment on our biology and how that shapes the way we see the world and the way we behave within our own skin and with other people.
Okay. Where's your most fascinating case? I want an example. Like, tell me this guy came to me with this specific problem. And, like, even you were, like, a little, like, taken back because it was so fascinating. Can you think of a situation where it was just like, wow, this is different, or this is like really deep, or really, you know?
There are 1,000 details I could give you that would be salacious and scintillating and titillating, but I really want to respect the disclosure that people share with me. So I'm not going to go into those kinds of details, but I think maybe what I can share is that
We're not bringing any names.
I know, but it's hard enough for people to talk about sex, and it's hard for people to get help when they have done something that is really different than either their own value system or society's value system. So I don't take that lightly, how hard it is for people to talk about that. But I think maybe one of the cases that was the most difficult for me to understand, and really always is the most difficult for me to understand, is sexual violence toward infants or sexual violence toward animals, because these are really helpless creatures. And
Infant?
yeah,
Stop.
yeah,
Yo.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of behavior that goes on in our world that is really, really dark, really dark.
Right.
So,
Oof, chills.
yeah. So, I mean, those are some of the cases that are the most interesting in the sense that they are the most hard to wrap our minds around as non-offending adults, right? How do people get to that place where they could exploit someone so helpless?
Okay, unpack a little. Like, why? Is it a power thing?
It's often a power thing. It's often an opportunity thing. It's often it's rooted in really sort of deeply paired feelings of worthlessness, powerlessness, and feeling out of control with opportunity. And when somebody acts out with that kind of behavior, their brain lies to them, and their brain says, "Oh, look, you are powerful. See what you can do." And it gives them and their ego a little bit of a boost that says, you're okay in this moment. And it's really unfortunate because the wake of trauma that leaves in everyone's lives, the victim and everyone around them in their lives, and the offender's life if they get caught, it's not worth it, right? It's not worth that little momentary boost of ego. But it happens sometimes, and it's hard to understand. It's hard for many offenders even to understand because most of it's unconscious, the motivation.
And so they come to you after they do something so obviously terribly wrong. And do they like show remorse and regret? Or is it just more like, do they come to you like, why am I into this?
Some do. Some have tremendous remorse, tremendous regret. They don't understand who they've come to be or what they've done, and it eats them up. Right. They really become ill with rage directed at themselves because they are so torn up. And many don't. Many are either so defended against the awareness about what they've done and sort of the implications of that. And some have brains that are wired differently. And so they actually don't have the same capacity for empathy that other people do. So it's, those are the cases that are maybe the easiest to understand and the most difficult to navigate from a treatment perspective.
And what do you think is the reason why someone does something so wrong? Is it something that happened to them?
Sometimes, and I want to be really careful when I say this because there is so much abuse that happens in our world, and the majority of people who are abused do not go on to become offenders or do not go on to abuse other people in their lives. A good portion of the people who offend have some pretty horrific trauma in their backgrounds, and part of what they are acting out is a trauma repetition. Now, some people don't have any trauma in their backgrounds, and they act out because their brain is organized a little bit differently. I was just reading a study the other day about how the brains of people who meet criteria for psychopathy are actually structured a little bit differently, and the parts of the brain responsible for things like emotion and memory don't fire the same way people who are not deemed psychopathic, how their brains fire. So we're still learning a lot about the neuroscience behind some of those kinds of really significantly more dangerous brain profiles. But for a lot of people, trauma is at the core of their behavior. And trauma, when we feel helpless and victimized and put upon in the world, there's not really much for us to do other than sit in that resentment. And that resentment transitions into entitlement, right? When we start to take care of ourselves and advocate for ourselves, if we're not doing it in healthy ways, it shows up like entitlement. And that's when people act out and can become predatory.
Right. Because it's like one thing to have intrusive thoughts of like thinking about doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like even as a normal person, you could have thoughts like that of like, oh, what if this or what if that?
Sure.
But then to act on it is what really sets the difference between someone who is like deeply disturbed.
Yeah.
For what other reason?
So you're so right on. There are many people who identify as what's called a minor attracted person, and they don't act on that with their behavior. So they recognize the attraction, the arousal, and they're also committed to never abusing a child. So there's just a lot of diversity and variety in terms of what are people's motives, what are their behavioral restraints, where do they lack restraint and impulse control, and do they care about, anything? Do they have empathy for the people around them? And so there's a little bit of an unfortunate recipe that all sort of has to hit right for people to transition into that kind of dangerous offending.
And is there any saving those people? Because if you're saying the way you're saying that there's something physiologically different about the way their brain works, then isn't that person just bound to behave the same way over and over? Or is it just like, no, this person can be saved and they can be
Well,
different?
again, I want to be really careful not to make blanket statements because each person is incredibly unique, and there are different risk and protective factors that we need to consider when we're thinking about risk of reoffending for any particular offender. And there are some people who would score very high on a checklist for psychopathy, right? Whose brains maybe are organized a little differently. The structures are different. They don't have the same capacity in some of the neural networks for empathy and
those
emotion.
people wouldn't come to you.
Well, they would definitely not come to me in private practice, but you might see them if they were trying to look good for court. They might be compelled to come to treatment, and let's say if they were getting a divorce, for example, and there was an accusation of inappropriateness. But more often than not, a provider would encounter people like that in the prison system. And they're often not really motivated for treatment unless there's something in it for them. So, there's a different kind of treatment that providers will employ for somebody who, is going to have a really hard time feeling remorse. We're not really going to try to emphasize empathy because that actually would teach them how to be a better predator. Instead, we're going to help them recognize what their long-term goals are and assess if any given behavior is going to help them meet that goal, even if it's fun in the short term for them. So it's a different strategy for treatment if they're even motivated for treatment. But the people who do self-report for treatment are people who recognize they have a lot to lose, and they don't want to fall into that trap of problematic sexual behavior where there might be legal consequences. So I work with a lot of people who recognize that their porn viewing habits have taken a turn, and they're looking at inappropriately aged people in their porn. Or they are recognizing attraction to people who are maybe 16, 17, 18 years old.
Isn't that the most looked up category of porn, teen?
It is. It is always in the top 3 to 5. Yeah. So I shouldn't say always, but more often than not, it's in the top 3 to 5 when I've looked. And
that says a lot.
It says a lot.
It says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a desire for the young. And there are lots of opinions about why that is. So I won't even begin to break that down now. But at the end of the day, the people who are going to want to get help can get help. And those are the people I think it's really important that we create safe space for so they can come forward without stigma and say, something's going on and I don't know what to do with this feeling, this urge, this impulse that I'm having, and it scares me. I want help.
Yeah. And I mean, just the thought that, like, not that many people even I mean, now slowly people are going to therapists more because before it used to be this thing of like, I'm not crazy. Why would I have to go to a therapist? But now people are realizing more that like, no, you don't have to be crazy to go to a therapist. But even sex therapist is, I think, even more
Stigmatized?
yeah, for sure. And also like not that many people think to even, oh, there are people out there that are sex therapists, not just a therapist. Like you can go to a sex therapist for like, you know,
For all kinds of things.
for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
For your sick thoughts.
Well, I'm not going to use that language, but for lots of
I'll do it
different
for
things. Okay. But people come to sex therapists for all kinds of things. Sometimes it's to curtail problematic sexual behavior, but sometimes they're really curious about trying something different in their sex lives, and they don't really know what to do or where to start, or is it okay? Does it mean something about me?
Yeah.
And more often than not, it doesn't mean anything about you other than you're a human with diverse interests.
Yeah, and honestly, like you guys, I'm totally kidding when I say stuff like that, because I can only imagine how many people go to sex therapists and say, am I normal?
Yes.
Is this normal? And I bet that every person, or maybe not every person, but like a lot of people probably have something in mind about themselves that they're thinking like, is this normal?
Yeah.
So it's like, and there is no normal, right?
There is no normal, but what I'll say about sex is that more people have far more diverse sexual interests than they will admit out loud. And if we could really culturally get to a place where we could recognize that, A, we're not so different than most people just because we have a fantasy that isn't talked about often in polite circles, you know, then we might be able to create more space for ourselves to have an integrated sexual experience. And what I mean by that is, you know, to really sort of let your sexuality be a part of who you are and not something you keep over
In
here.
the shadow.
Yeah, in like this dark room under a wet blanket somewhere, you know, like, or let it be a
Very
part of you. Let it breathe some air.
But then like, what if you're into some weird stuff?
I don't really know that there is such a thing as weird stuff. There's less common stuff.
It's because you're extremely educated in it and it's been so normalized to you.
Well, that is maybe true, but that still doesn't mean that people's interests are weird. And that's the word I want to challenge here. We have all different kinds of sexual interests and potential that are really, really healthy, even if they're uncommon.
Yeah. True. Huh. How much time do we have, Kyle?
No more time?
So sad.
Oh, no more sexy time.
I know. I still have questions.
Well, we can do this again sometime.
Again, yes.
This was really fun. Thank you.
So much fun. I loved it. It was so informative and fun at the same time. Thank you, Dr. Kate.
Thank you
for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, everybody. All right.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13.